Which smell do you remember from childhood days?
The smell of grass, mashed carrots, my mum, grandma's cooking. That nice smell when you open the window on a summer morning after it's been raining. Swimming pools and the smell of chlorine. The smell of burnt food. I like the air in the mountains with that moist herbal smell.
How do you feel when you smell that?
It feels like home.
What do you know about the link between smell and memory? Find out why we're so sentimental and other secrets of the brain now on Tomorrow Today.
They're a symbol of love and they smell wonderful. And that fragrance can also help you learn new vocabulary. According to a German research team, the scent of roses helps the brain retain information.
We know that scent plays a very special role in learning. When we learn vocabulary or anything, we learn it in a specific context. If you smell something that you often smelled in your childhood, you're immediately transported back to it.
To investigate exactly how scents influence our brain, neurobiologist Jürgen Kohlmeier and his team conducted an experiment. 165 test subjects were given envelopes and had to study Japanese vocabulary for 3 days. Half the study participants had a scented envelope filled with dried rose petals. The control group had unscented envelopes filled with plain scraps of paper. Those who were surrounded by the scent of roses did better in the vocabulary test, remembering on average 8.5% more vocabulary. The team observed that the scent proved especially effective when the participants were under time pressure.
When there's not much time or there's just a lot to learn, the scent appears to act like a kind of brain booster, helping it retain as much as possible.
Some of the study participants were exposed to the rose scent not only while they studied, but also while they slept. The researchers wanted to know if this would help their brains store more of the new information.
The interesting question is, what are the criteria for our brains to decide what goes into the long-term memory and what doesn't? And beyond that, can external factors influence this decision-making process? And that's where scent comes into play.
That's because scent can influence the brain while we're asleep or learning, specifically the hippocampus, which mediates between short and long-term memory. Perceiving smells is directly connected to the hippocampus. Information absorbed at the same time then enters the long-term memory more deeply, at least that's the theory. And sleep also plays a crucial role. Experiments in a sleep laboratory have shown that during the deep sleep phase, the brain reorganizes at least part of what it has learned and decides which information is moved into the long-term memory. Scent effectively reactivates what was learned during the day.
When what was learned is reactivated in the brain, the probability increases that it will be consolidated.
What exactly happens in the brain during this process remains a mystery, but brain scans show that smells can activate the hippocampus even in deep sleep. If the brain has already associated information with the scent during the day, the scent alone can help it to store it at night. One possible explanation, the same nerve cells are activated that were already firing when the person was awake. In order for the scent to help with learning, it has to be used in an actual test, for example, a vocabulary test. This helps the brain access what it has learned, at least for a few days. But the scent of roses doesn't protect against forgetting. The effect doesn't appear to be long-term. However, it definitely can help with short-term vocabulary learning. But why roses? It's actually quite random. It was the fragrance used in the first study on the topic. Later studies also used rose scent so that the results could be easily compared.
That's why we and many other colleagues use rose fragrance, because the original study uses rose fragrance. But I'm firmly convinced that other fragrances also work. But that has to be shown, of course, in further studies.
So it's possible that lavender or citrus, for example, can also help consolidate learning, at least in the short term. Researchers are still figuring out how the brain stores information in memory and processes it at night. But remember, the next time someone gives you roses, they can also help your vocabulary learning skills.
Our brains also help us feel emotions. Dobrila Bozic is a viewer from Bosnia and Herzegovina with a truly timeless question on this subject.
What is love? It's a sensation that puts our bodies into a state of emergency, similar to when danger looms. Our brains go into overdrive, sending out a cocktail of different neurotransmitters that stimulate our senses and ignite a firework of intense feelings. In the first phase of falling in love, our blood is flooded with adrenaline. That's the same hormone that's triggered by exhilaration or stress and gives you butterflies in your stomach. It causes our pupils to dilate. The body is put on alert, causing blood pressure and pulse to rise. Meanwhile, oxytocin helps with bonding and developing trust. Oxytocin is often dubbed the cuddle hormone, as it's produced through physical contact. Dopamine and serotonin, known as the happy hormones, are of course also part of being in love. But in the early phase, our serotonin levels often fluctuate. For example, when intoxicating happiness turns to desperate longing when we're separated from the one we love. Studies of our brainwaves show that being in love especially activates the areas of the brain that are responsible for sexual urges. So can we conclude that this hormone cocktail was only created by nature to ensure that we focus on one partner during reproduction? In time, our bodies get used to the high-level doses of hormones. And after 2 to 3 years at the latest, the immediate thrill of infatuation is over.
But we do commit to long-term partnerships and are keen to help each other out. That's because we're social creatures who derive satisfaction from supporting each other. Researchers have identified specific parts of the brain that enable us to feel empathy.
I found 20 euros yesterday.
My research has shown that we are all fundamentally empathetic people, very much so. Whatever the situation, we simply feel what other people feel. In our Western world, we tend to see each other very much as individuals. But what my research has shown is how strongly we're shaped by the people around us.
Christian Kaisers is a neuroscientist. A lot of his research has focused on how our brains empathize with other people. He began his research with quite a provocative experiment. First, volunteers were asked to undergo an MRI scan.
To understand how our brains enable us to empathize with other people's feelings, we needed to be able to trigger certain emotions during the scan. So we had to find a stimulus that could evoke powerful emotions. And one way we found of doing that was to place an anesthesia mask on the test person and then introduce various smells through the mask during the scan.
Smells trigger a whole chain reaction in our brains that we're mostly unaware of. Within milliseconds, we register whether the smell is pleasant or not, and we respond accordingly, also with a physical reaction. If the smell is repulsive, we automatically pull a face and want to leave. Our stomach contracts, and in extreme cases we might even throw up. It was these kind of repulsive smells that Christian Kaisers tested.
One smell that works really well is butyric acid. It really smells like butter that's gone really rancid.
In the next run, the test participants just saw videos of people looking disgusted, without smelling anything for themselves.
What's shown here is what happens when the test participants smell something unpleasant themselves.
The so-called insula is active, which we know is involved in processing smells.
Where it gets interesting is when we look and see what happens when the test candidates just see other people responding to bad smells.
He then lays the two scans on top of each other. The areas in white show where they correlate.
Here you can see how a part of their own experience of disgust was reactivated. They really feel their stomach contracting, for example, or they sense the unpleasant tastes or smells.
Knowing how bad we feel when we're in pain, we have an automatic urge to help. And our brain rewards us for that. When we do something good, it releases happy hormones. They lower our stress levels and strengthen our immune systems. That even affects our DNA, dialing down so-called risk genes, which would otherwise promote inflammation or chronic conditions like cardiovascular disease, cancer, or dementia. So our chances of remaining healthy increase. But some people don't seem to have any sense of empathy for others at all. Christian Kaisers studied this group too.
To understand what happens and what goes wrong in these cases, we worked with a number of psychopaths from high-security jails. And what we observed is that when these psychopaths watched others suffering pain, the area of the brain involved in feeling pain was hardly activated at all. So at first we thought, okay, maybe psychopaths do the terrible things they do because they just can't feel pain.
But psychopaths are often very good at manipulating people. To do that, they actually have to be able to empathize quite well. So the researchers told them to actively imagine themselves in the place of the victim, who was currently experiencing pain. Suddenly, their brains responded just like those of the healthy test participants.
That made us realize that the problem is not that psychopaths are unable to empathize, it's just that they don't empathize spontaneously. They only do it when they want to.
Another surprising finding, we can all regulate our level of empathy according to the response that's needed.
Oh, did you burn yourself?
Depending on the situation.
On your thumb. Let's go and cool it.
Christian Kaisers is now studying whether it's possible to help people with mental disorders become more empathetic. He already succeeded in doing the opposite in another study, showing that empathy can be suppressed.
The experiment was actually quite simple. We showed each candidate a person being slapped on the hand. And then we gave them €6 each and said they could choose what to do with it. They could keep the €6, but then this poor person would have to be slapped again just as hard. Or they could give some of it away. For every euro they gave away, the slap would be 1/10 less painful.
On the first go, they found the harder the slap, the more money the candidates gave away.
Then we measured how that behavior changed when we used a magnetic stimulus to disrupt the activity in the somatosensory cortex.
That's the part of the brain that perceives pain, even when just watching it being inflicted on others. The temporary disruption to this function meant the candidate's response no longer depended on the strength of the slap. They couldn't differentiate the pain anymore. So, several parts of the brain that are networked have to work together in order for us to be suitably empathetic. Being empathetic is our natural state. When we use that to help others,
Are you feeling better? Yeah, I'm getting there.
empathy can actually make us happy and content, which can help us to keep healthy.
In May 2023, this story garnered global interest, a paralyzed man walking again. Thanks to electronic brain implants. These devices record his brain signals and send the data to a portable computer. That data is then transmitted to another implant in his spinal cord, which passes on the instructions.
The simple daily task of going to the market to get fresh fruit was something that Gert-Jan really missed. The 40-year-old was left paralysed after an accident 12 years ago. Now he can once again enjoy this simple pleasure. The Dutchman is the first person to receive a new type of double implant that creates a direct neurological link between the brain and the spinal cord. Via a wireless digital interface, Gert-Jan can control his paralysed legs with his intentions.
It's cool. It was the first time I bought something in the market while walking, so yeah, great experience.
Gert-Jan can't walk perfectly, but he can do things that were until recently impossible for him. With a walking aid, he can stand, walk, and even climb stairs. Through training, his movements are improving from day to day. Swiss neuroscientists have been researching the technology for many years now. In a first version, there was just an implant in the spinal cord. The commands to walk came via a tablet. Now they're sent via the brain to a processing unit, and the movements are more natural.
With the pre-programmed stimulation, walking was much more robotic, not very fluid. Now, though, because the brain directly controls the stimulation, we have a very smooth, coordinated gait.
In the Swiss Paraplegic Centre, the research is being followed with great interest. It's not yet a cure, but it's the best possible technical solution, says the head physician.
The concept within this development is fantastic. I believe it's the future, at least until we have a therapy with which we can heal spinal cord injuries. It's definitely new and exciting and will trigger a great amount of emotions amongst our patients.
This new concept heralds a new era in the treatment of motor deficits. In the future, similar technology will likely be able to restore the function of the arms and hands as well.
Brain implants can also ease the symptoms of Parkinson's. The treatment can reduce tremors and muscle rigidity using electrical stimulation. Many patients who suffer from the disease have benefited.
Tim Zeidel is conscious during the operation to implant electrodes into his brain. The surgeon needs him to respond and speak. Zeidel was diagnosed with Parkinson's in his mid-40s. Despite heavy medication, his tremors won't go away. He's hoping deep brain stimulation will help. We can see the tremors very clearly. Now we're going to stimulate individual contacts. The day before the procedure, he went out for a walk. He's not scared. He just longs for the tremors to stop. You can see how much I'm trembling. I'm not shivering due to the cold. It's the tremor. My handwriting is affected. Also leisure activities. Going out to eat with my wife. Some people who see me for the first time think I can't count up to 3. They talk down to me. Parkinson's forced him to cut down his working hours. He can't go on business trips, let alone run a marathon. And the drugs that are intended to boost dopamine levels in his brain affect his mood. I want my life back. At Tübingen's University Hospital, they have long experience with deep brain stimulation. This brain pacemaker can be adjusted as the illness gets more severe or symptoms change. To be able to respond quickly, they have recently begun to use a smartwatch to measure tremors, agility, and sleeping patterns via sensors. You can see your hand is moving about, and also your arm a little bit. Those movements are now being recorded and stored. It's like a long-term monitoring. Numerous Parkinson sufferers have already undergone this procedure worldwide. It almost doesn't draw any blood. Tiny holes have to be drilled into the skull for the electrode implants. From there on, it's a highly delicate operation, planned with CT images. During the operation, measurements are taken to gauge whether the electrodes are in the right place. We are going to check the cells in the region, step by step. They have to be implanted several centimeters deep into the brain. Tim Seidel has to continue to raise his arm. The tremor is also being measured via the motion sensors on your arm and the watch which we fitted yesterday. After 4 hours, the electrodes are finally in place. Now Tim Seidel can finally sleep. Under general anesthetic, they connect together the cables under his skin and implant the brain pacemaker below his collarbone. Deep brain stimulation is becoming increasingly sophisticated. Growing knowledge about individual areas of the brain means more precision. As part of an international study, they are now testing how closely they can monitor a patient's condition by collecting data via a smartwatch. Digital technology now gives us access to a constant stream of information. We know about daytime fluctuations. We know whether things are better or worse mornings or afternoons. We know whether a patient would benefit from an adjustment in the mid to long term. The treatment is working for Tim Seidel. He is back in the hospital 8 weeks later for minor tweaks. Neurologist Daniel Weiss switches off the brain pacemaker first to see how bad the symptoms are without any correction. Yes, your right hand is now trembling a lot more. Uncontrollably. Uncontrollably. Hold your arm like that again. My leg is starting now. I'll switch the stimulator on again. And the tremor disappears with the flick of a switch. It takes just seconds. When you switch it on or off, the effect is immediate, unlike tablets that take a long time. I'm really pleased. It's worked. Tim Seidel can write neatly again. He can easily eat and work in the garden with his wife. Because I don't have to take care of my Parkinson's anymore, I can look after myself and plan and enjoy my leisure time. I can use tools again. I can also use a chainsaw to cut down a branch, but I prefer to do it by hand. I enjoy the fact that I can. He and his wife are even planning a trip on a canal boat. But the procedure doesn't work as well for everyone. Deep brain stimulation can also cause side effects, just like medication. Symptoms can persist or return, but the two of them just want to look ahead.
We've got back our quality of life. We still have plans ahead of us. He's so young. It would have been a shame if he hadn't done it.
Another huge benefit, he doesn't have to go to the hospital as much anymore. His brain pacemaker can be adjusted remotely. How have you been lately? I've had to take much less medication. The tremor is really diminished. The doctors can access his implanted pacemaker from the hospital. Of course, data security has to be very tight. So we could slightly increase the stimulation level today. I can do this right now via remote control. Yes, let's try. Okay, then I'll do it. You won't notice much. I have switched it from 2 to 2.1. Do you feel all right? Yes, I think it's working. Electrical impulses relayed via remote control. Just a few years ago, that would have been science fiction. Today, it's reality. This technology has improved, and Tim Zeidel's quality of life along with it.
If our blood is red, why are our veins?
Do you have a science question? Send it to us as a video, text or voice message. If we answer it on the show, we'll send you a little surprise as a thank you. Come on, just ask. That's all for this edition of Tomorrow Today, which was all about the brain. We'll be back next week with more science stories. See you then and stay curious. Bye-bye.